Hello. My name is Jason Concepcion, and I'm currently in the throes of the novel coronavirus COVID-19, which I tested positive for last weekend and have been suffering symptoms of from about a day before I had tested positive for it. All of which is to say, this is going to be a crazy episode because not only am I suffering from the novel coronavirus COVID-19, but my brilliant co-host, the best in the business, folks, the number one comics writer, pop historian in the game today, Rosie Knight. Rosie, how are you?
I also have novel coronavirus, aka COVID-19, and somehow we didn't get this at the same place. We legitimately have not seen each other in public for a long time in real life.
Good point, Rosie, because here's what I have to say.
This happened.
You can read the news. COVID is rampant right now. People wear your masks. I've been to numerous places over the last week in the zone when I could have gotten it. And I was always one of like the 5% of people there wearing a mask.
Mm-hmm.
It ain't gone away, folks.
Everybody's getting it. It's good to just take care. And it's hard right now because the way that the numbers are being reported and the fact that a lot of people are testing at home means we won't necessarily see those numbers in the same way we did in other waves. So it's just really good to follow your gut and be thoughtful for your own sake and for other people's. And because this is very gnarly. You don't want to be sitting here sweating like us, sweating, talking about She-Hulk.
I know. Well, great transition, because let's do that. The She-Hulk trailer. She-Hulk, attorney at law! She's barred, folks. She's a barred attorney at New York State. It's Jennifer Walters' cousin of our good friend Bruce Banner. The show starring Tatiana Maslany as Jennifer Walters, Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner. Hello, Tim Roth as Emil Blonsky, Benedict Wong as Wong, and others. Let's talk about this trailer, which is absolutely super, super fun. Here's my first takeaway. Hulk's arm is fine. Therefore, this is pre-Endgame. Therefore, we're going to fill in the stuff clearly post-snap, and that is Bruce Banner's, post-Ragnarok journey to becoming Professor Hulk. We're going to see some of that timeline filled in, and that is super, super cool and awesome.
Yeah, I want to talk about that because, if you're not like us and you don't be pausing the trailer and everything, you might be like, what are you talking about? But this is it. In Endgame, we met Professor Hulk, who explained that he was a new version of Banner and Hulk combined. He was not a third entity. He was who he is. He's an intelligent,
I put the brawn and the brains together.
I put the brains and the brawn together. And now look at me.
And he's looking hunky, and I'm sure some people on the internet were calling him daddy.
Cheese.
Did you get that?
At the end of Shang-Chi, we saw Bruce Banner in his human form with a sling on his arm, because in Endgame, we saw Hulk wield the Infinity Gauntlet and try and snap.
Bruce!
So in the modern continuity, we know that Bruce is back in his normal human body and he has an arm sling. In this trailer, as Jason so smartly noticed, he is Professor Hulk and his arms are looking fine. So it is very, very likely that this is going to be in that period between Infinity War and Endgame, which is something we have yet to see.
Another thing we're going to see, I think we can deduce from this wonderful, again, trailer. There's the part of the trailer in which one of the heads of the law firm that Jennifer works for says, hey, we want to start a superhero division.
We just started a superhuman law division, and I want you to be the face of it.
Which is directly very much a comics thing. Like, Jennifer's specialty is powered incidents, cases involving or related to people with powers. And we remember from Shang-Chi, right, that Emil Blonsky, the Abomination, in his comics accurate form, was doing fights for money against Wong. And we're like, holy shit, wasn't he like in jail? Wasn't he in super people jail? And we see him in this trailer when one of the law partners mentions, hey, we want to start a superpowered persons division. I think this is how he gets out. I think Jennifer, and honestly, rightly so, I think you would make the argument that like, hey, we can't hold this guy forever. Like, it's actually, yes, he's theoretically a weapon of mass destruction, but there's other powered people out there now who are also similarly powerful. And what does it mean legally that we can just like hold this guy ad infinitum? And I think that's how Emil Blonsky gets his freedom or whatever status he has by Shang-Chi, where he's able to come and go at will.
Yeah, I think you're right. Also, I think that the cell that we see in this trailer, we see Jennifer in when she's testing her Hulk powers, that looks very similar to where we see Abomination walk back into during Shang-Chi. So I think that Bruce, whatever part of Bruce's life this is, it's going to be important and foundational to the notion of whatever's going on in the current continuity. We know that S.W.O.R.D. was set up. That was a really big time for S.W.O.R.D. And we found out about all the plans that they were making because of what had happened because of the blip. So it wouldn't surprise me if some of the things that we thought we were going to see being established with Shang-Chi, like Dark Avengers, etc., if those things might have already been in the works during this 5 years. And we're going to kind of retroactively learn about them and see how they could come into play in the wider MCU.
What else do we see? Let's talk about this. So we see in the opening shots, we see a car tumbling down the hill. Now, in the comics, Jennifer gets her powers because she needs a blood transfusion. She has a particular blood type, and so they go to a relative. And, of course, Bruce Banner is the relative. And the side effect of him donating blood to his cousin is that the gamma radiation in his blood also gets into Jen's body, and she reacts in a very similar way to Bruce and becomes the Shield. Now, in the comics, it's gangsters shoot her because of her legal activities, and she requires this blood transfusion. So I think clearly it's going to be an accident rather than gangsters, which anyway is like, I think Punisher debuted like 2 years before that, so it's like they just like reused the Punisher's origin.
They were like everyone's family's being killed by gangsters, probably at family barbecues.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right, and something that our super producer Saul was saying when we were prepping for this episode was like, Hawkeye did something really interesting where it tied Kate Bishop's origin and her tragic backstory directly into events of the MCU. And that definitely feels like something we could see here. But from the tone of the show, which is like very 80s and funny and kind of like feels a bit more lighthearted than a lot of the other stuff we've gotten, I wouldn't be surprised to see them play with that kind of fan favorite conversation about like collateral damage, which is like not something we've really seen very much. They touched on it in the Netflix stuff, but I wouldn't be surprised if her accident was like something got thrown and hit a brick wall and then it fell on her during an Avengers
snap
fight
or something.
Exactly. It's like the snap, an ice cream van had a guy who wasn't driving, and I just think like this show seems to be going into that humor, and it's if it's gonna be like the comics, she's always been a very meta, fourth wall breaking character. So to have a little bit of that conversation with the audience and say, well, this is kind of what it's like for normal people who live in the MCU, you might not even end up being normal because your cousin's got gamma blood.
Let's talk about one of the real surprises in this trailer, which is the very, very brief shot of Frogman.
Frogman. I did not know this was going to happen. I cannot believe this happened. I
cannot believe it. Tell us about Frogman. Frogman, very, very minor character that I maintain was at least in some form a like aesthetic influence on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I claim that. I have no evidence for that, but I claim that.
The truth is that all those, I mean, TMNT is like one of my favorite topics. And all of those comics, the original black and white stuff, which is very dark and very funny, was an absolute response to Marvel and DC and big superhero comics. So that would make a lot of sense, especially when you think about the fact that in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, for example, the bad group is called the Foot Clan instead of the Hand, you know, and stuff like that. So it was like a self-published kind of shitpost comic, and I love that it became this kids powerhouse. But yes, Frogman, it is with a hyphen like Spider-Man, so don't spell it wrong or else the comic fans might get upset with you. Created by J.M. DeMatteis and Kerry Gammill from a Marvel Team-Up issue, Marvel Team-Up 121, June 1982, which I believe
those were fun, man.
Yeah, and that puts it between that. I think that puts it before the first, 2 years before the first Ninja Turtles comic. So
that's why I'm saying, and also like Eugene, the Frogman's
yes. Eugene
secret
Paul
identity.
Petio.
Eugene's like 15. This is why I claim that Frogman is an influence on TV. But like again, I'm saying this.
Let's get Kevin Eastman on here to talk about this.
Yeah.
Local legend.
Yeah.
So yes, his mother is called Rosie. Shout out to me.
Yeah.
And he's like a kid who wants to be a villain, and it is like really weird and strange, and he definitely one of those weird characters from the 70s and 80s where you're just like, how did this get in there?
Yeah,
but he actually
like Paste Pot Pete, like kind of level character.
He's one of those characters who's so out there and weird that if you're a comic book writer, occasionally if like me and Jason got to write a comic, we would be pulling these weird characters that we love. Yes. So he pops up, like he's in Secret Invasion, you know, as a Skrull. You see these different...
What a fucking crazy... By the way, hilarious pull in Secret Invasion that Frogman was a Skrull.
And then, like, I mean, he's definitely... I think there's creators now who remember him fondly because he pops up a lot. And to see him here, they do a really good job kind of recontextualizing the costume, which in the comics is like very cartoony. In the trailer, as we see it, it looks kind of like a Super Sentai costume meets Vigilante from the recently released Peacemaker show that we talked a lot about. So I'm very interested to see. My gut says he will be someone that she represents. That seems to be the only way to easily build him into the show. Unless he is actually secretly the villain and Titania's like gonna be her ally instead.
I'm glad you mentioned Titania, played by Jameela Jamil. She is, we assume, gonna be the big bad of the series and is a frequent foil for She-Hulk over the years. Now, Titania in the comics gets her powers from Dr. Doom. It will be
dun dun
dun dun dun. It will be absolutely. I will be fascinated to know where she gets her powers this time.
Yeah.
Also in the comics, well, first of all, She-Hulk was a member of the Fantastic Four, so there's that. And then also, She-Hulk represented Dr. Doom's son in his attempt to basically flee Latveria and become an American citizen. So there are a lot of really cool Dr. Doom connections, and it just feels like, once again, we're inching towards a Fantastic Four canonical debut. The fact that we saw John Krasinski as Reed Richards notwithstanding.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's a really interesting pull. Obviously, she's like a really famous She-Hulk villain, and it makes sense because they're obviously going for kind of like an Ally McBeal vibe. So it makes sense to give her like a female antagonist. But I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some kind of implication of like a power broker sort, like where did she get this power from?
That's great.
How could she get it? Also in the comics, like even though it's kind of a wacky origin during the Secret Wars stuff, I think it's Secret Wars 3 where she's introduced, it's actually like bad. She does get tested on and has this kind of what could definitely be written as like a tragic backstory or a reason to be pissed off at people or a reason to kind of want to become a villain. So I think there's interesting stuff to dig into there. And I think it's really interesting that in the first trailer for the show, it's just this kind of like glimpse of a fight. Yeah. So I'm really interested to see where they go because I feel like the MCU is definitely blurring the lines between like good guys and bad guys and kind of that gray area between ally and antagonist. And I think that relationship could be very prime for that. And the fact that Wong is going to be in this show and we know that he is connected to Abomination. He's connected to whatever this secret team he's kind of trying to put together. He's like the new Phase 4 Nick Fury, which I love.
I love that. At some point, we should discuss the fact that Wong, like comics Wong currently is great. Movie Wong is orders of magnitude the best Wong. Like, it's not even close to how much cooler he is in the movies than in the
I think you can absolutely, Benedict Wong shout out, that's like all you.
Great.
Like, you're killing it. And I think that you can't understate his impact on why the comic book Wong is better. Because, like, these movies and comics are so intertwined. And when you have such a brilliant, in-depth, like, thoughtful, funny, silly, strong, brilliant character, and I know that some people would definitely also like becoming like thirsty for Wong after Doctor Strange 2. I've seen the internet. I know people were feeling it. Like, he had a new outfit. He was looking good. And like, I love it. And I love that it's up the game. I mean, honestly, they've done a really great job.
There might be some of our listeners out there like, oh, I love the trailer. I'm getting into comics. What can I read? It's super, super easy. Read Dan Slott's She-Hulk, the complete collection, story by Dan Slott, Adi Granoff on cover art, also Paul Peltier and Scott Collins on art. It kind of like set the modern tone for She-Hulk as a character in the early 2000s as this kind of like one-time shy lawyer who has become this very like super confident, hard charging, work hard, play hard character who's like in a lot of ways like a focus point for the female superhero community. Like, she has so many friends across the female superhero community, which is part of what makes that collection so fun. Is just like, I've said this many times, I'm a big fan of like superheroes just hang out stories. And there's so many scenes in that collection where it's just like Jen just hanging out with her friends.
She's really good at that. Also, because she's one of the few heroes aside from like the Fantastic Four. So she's going to be one of the first MCU heroes who has like a full-time job. She's not just like bumming around, like somehow not getting paid for being an Avenger. She has like a full-time job. So that leads to a lot of funny kind of slice of life, sitting around stuff. And I mean, in that Dan Slott collection, Titania is like a major antagonist. So you're looking for there. You have the new poster that they just released is almost certainly based on one of Greg Horn's covers, which is actually the back of the collection, which is her kind of striding up these stairs, you know, and the visualization that they've gone for as Tatiana as She-Hulk is very much that Greg Horn kind of vibe. She's big, but she's like shapely and she's kind of athletic, and so it's very interesting to see that.
So there's the She-Hulk collection by Dan Slott, complete collection. This collects like She-Hulk 1 to 12, and I think a couple, maybe an annual or something like that. And then She-Hulk the complete collection, a more recent collection by Charles Soule, Javier Pulido, and Munza Vicente. And that one is just super, super funny. Charles Soule was a lawyer, so he's got all the lingo down. And that's another one where it's like Jen hanging out with Hellcat, you know, like Jen.
Her friendship with Patsy is so great, and I wonder
love
if that's going to be something that plays in.
That's okay. So I have a prediction. I'm gonna be. You know, our listeners know how much we love to make predictions, and we don't care if they're wrong. We just love to do it.
Yeah, it's just fun.
So much of like the texture of Jennifer Walter's stories is about the role she plays in the broader superhero community and her friendship and bonds with various figures throughout the female superhero community. I think we're going to see more than Frogman debut. I think we might see others. I think we might, because like, if you think about it, superhero division, I get that there's a lot of like, you know, property damage and loss of life from the various superhero incidents around the world. Who could forget Hulk fucking up Harlem and every place he goes, you know, but when you talk about the community, it's not like there's that many, you know, like there's not that many folks that she could represent. She could represent, you know, Bruce Banner in the various lawsuits that are probably lodged against him for destroying, you know, Betty's college, Harlem, etc.
Mass murderer Hawkeye.
But there's not that many. She could get Ant-Man, like his charges dropped, etc. But there's not like that many. There's really not that many superheroes yet. So I do wonder if we might not, if the Frogman drop isn't a signal that, hey, all those like really, really fun, rarely used, minor Marvel characters, we might see some of them pop up here.
Yeah, I think that you're right. And I also think this is going to continue the Hawkeye tradition, not just in tone, but in rebranding and reshaping the Netflix Marvel shows as something for the main MCU. It's quite likely we might see Matt Murdock here. He too is a lawyer, and him and Jennifer have worked alongside each other. And something else that you just made me realize when we're talking about this, it could work in the same way the Netflix shows worked, which is when you actually watch those shows, they introduce so many comic book characters because they needed like a living community. Like Luke Cage, so many characters. And no MCU show has really done that. Hawkeye used names of characters, but it wasn't actually, they didn't become those characters as we knew them. She-Hulk could be a way of introducing a new character. I mean, if they wanted to do it like a procedural, you could have a new character that she's
I love that.
looking after every week, you know? And it would be a way to build out that community. It would be very funny.
It would
to
be
kind
super,
of see,
super funny.
And some of them, you know, you have her defending a hero, you have her defending a villain, you have her kind of building that moral compass. And like that, the Charles Soule run that you were talking about with Javier's amazing art, like that's the one where she defends the son of Doctor Doom and Captain America.
Yes.
You know, so there's all different kinds of ways that you can explore that. And I think that looking to those two, this one has her face down with Matt Murdock. Like Deadpool is in this, and there's a holiday party, so you get that fun space. I just think this could be a launch pad for building out those weirder, smaller superhero roles.
Yeah. And again, I wonder if it'd be cool to get a Hellcat drop in this. Hellcat, one of the oldest Marvel characters.
Yep.
I mean, going back to the 40s. Like, this is like a
that's from the days when
comics era, like fucking Marvel character.
Fashion comics. Really incredible times. People forget those old days when women were seen as a truly large part, half of the market. So they had romance comics, they had fashion comics, and that's where Patsy Walker, who became Patsy Walker Hellcat, came from. And she was in the Jessica Jones show in a kind of reimagined version, but this version of She-Hulk seems like a better place to bring in a different version of her. There was a Hellcat comic with incredible art by Brittany Williams a few years ago, and that was very much like She-Hulk's having a party at the office, and like, look at all these different characters who are here, and oh no, who are you gonna have to defend? Is it gonna be like
that's
Squirrel
my favorite
Girl?
That's what I love about She-Hulk stories, and that's why I hope. And that's why I say, because it is really such an important part of the texture and feel of Jennifer Walter's stories. And so, you know, selfishly, I just hope we see a lot of
I think the tone of the trailer
heroes pop up.
It hints at that. It hints like her and Bruce in the bar. There's like a comedy. And just like in the comics, she acclimates very well to being in her She-Hulk form because that's how she chooses to be.
Yeah.
And it looks like from the trailer, that's going to be the case for most of the show.